My name is Dr. Johnny Mack, and I am the founding director of the World House Project, Inc. The World House Project, Inc. is a nonprofit organization that was originally part of the Stanford University. It was recently launched from Stanford University as a separate organization. The World House Project, Inc. Its programs focus on a network. In fact, we call it the World House Global Network, as well as institutes where we do research, education, and social action. These ideas are part of a much broader idea espoused by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who made popular the idea of the World House. And I'm here to talk about what the World House actually means and how it can apply to our lived experiences today.
Good afternoon, Dr. Mack. I'm very glad for being here because I know that you want to help us to understand how we can live non-violently. I know that we are living in a world where conflicts are increasingly frequent and where we are witnessing a sort of return to strength. So I would like to ask you, do you think that we have to live in this world for how long?
Yes, of course. We live in a world where we have to learn to live together. Women and men of different backgrounds, of different races, ethnic, religious. And if we are to live together, then learning how to live together in what we call the World House is really what the human experience is all about. My work is examining what that World House idea is and how we can learn to live together. Dr. Martin Luther King called that idea the beloved community, where within this World House we find ways of getting along with each other, because he ultimately understood we could live as brothers and sisters together, or we can perish as fools.
Which role can we young women play to have a meaningful contribution to this world?
That's where women can have a meaningful contribution. And in fact, unfortunately, throughout history, women have been marginalized like other groups have been marginalized. But today, marginalizing women is no longer acceptable. It should never have been acceptable. Young women such as yourself are integral to creating the kind of world where we can live in peace. In fact, I think if we turn leadership of the world over to women, we'd be in a much better place. And so it's very important at an early age that we recognize the full potential of young women, of girls, and help them to realize that potential and make their contribution equally as men do in how we organize our society.
I know you were impressed by your experience in the Rosarno slums, so I would like to ask you if you think that governments in Europe have to face this situation in a different way, and how is it possible to clearly violate these human rights in such this way?
The whole idea of human rights, I believe, must recognize that all human beings have equal dignity and worth. And how we, therefore, interact with each other should include this recognition of the dignity and worth of all humanity. And so how we organize our social systems and processes, and institutions, must reflect that fundamental value of the equal dignity and worth of every human being, and once again, irrespective of gender, of race, of religious orientation, or any other human characteristic. Fundamentally, we are all equally suited in terms of that dignity and worth. And so governments, I would argue, must recognize that and build within governmental processes and services that governments provide to its citizenship and those who come pass through our governmental systems, our states, that irrespective or regardless of other characteristics of our humanity, to treat everyone with equal dignity and recognize that worth as fundamental.
It would be interesting to introduce non-violence literary courses at schools in Italy. I would like to know if you would like to help us in our institute or in general in schools to introduce these courses to help us in this sense to develop this sense of non-violence.
Introducing nonviolence into the curriculum at every level of our education would be essential in creating the kind of society that we want to live in. We spend a great deal of time studying violence, but very little time studying nonviolence and what it can mean in creating the kind of society that we want. Any way that we can be helpful in the World House Project, Inc., or my own work, we would be happy to cooperate with your individual school or with the entire school system. Because again, nonviolence should be a fundamental course that begins at the earliest stages of our educational process and follow us all the way through our highest levels of education.
We young people are always listening to news about a possible third world war, a nuclear one. So do you think that we'll get to this point? Do you think that there are international organizations that could avoid this problem, for example with peace tables, speaking about cooperation or environmental protection?
The idea of creating, a peaceful world is one that has followed every generation. The question is, at what point, at which generation will really embrace this idea of peace? I'd like to think that it will be your generation, that your generation will say, this far and no further will we allow the type of violence that has brought world wars. It should be your generation that stands up and organizes and mobilizes for peace. I believe, and I have hope in you and your generation, young girls and young boys who will become the future leaders of the world. And so it is up to you to stand on the shoulders of those who've come before you, but to lead the world into a peaceful and just society.
In the encyclical Laudato Si, the Pope talked about integral ecology. How do you decline the word integral, and which is the relationship between non-violence and the environment? And do you think that we should try to respect our heart and love this planet so that we can arrive to non-violence in general?
A holistic approach to nonviolence will not only embrace the relationship between or among humanity, but humanity's relationship to the rest of the world. And so there is a certain notion of environmental violence. And what we do to our environment will ultimately affect us, which is why nonviolence is so practical in terms of how we engage the environment, where animals, the plant life, all holistically the ecology of the earth. If we ruin it, we ruin ourselves, and we don't have a future. And so in this world house that we live in, how we treat the environment around that house will determine the quality of life within the world house. And so we must develop a nonviolent strategy for engaging the environment and how we treat the environment. Ultimately, once again, that will determine the quality of life that we will have in the world house.
Thank you for your inspiring words. I would like to bring your words to my friends and my companions. So, can you give me a word that could help us to become more incisive and creative about this non-violent strategy?
We are what we are today because of what happened yesterday. And until we have the necessary confrontation with yesterday, our tomorrows will forever be the same. That's a charge to your generation, that understanding the mistakes that those who came before you made, so that you don't repeat those mistakes. Recognizing that the decisions you make will determine the future of those who follow you, that your children and your children's children will recognize the quality of life that you establish, that you make regarding the decisions as those who came before you did. So I would encourage you to embrace the idea of nonviolence, to insist upon it being a part of your educational system, your educational processes, how you work in life. Some of you will be doctors, some lawyers, some politicians. Carry this idea of nonviolence throughout your life experiences, in your work, in your family life, and in your social life. If you can embrace that at this stage, you will indeed realize a nonviolent world. And quite frankly, we're counting on you.
Thank you very much.